Alrighty. Through the Trapdoor, Chapter 16. In the years to come, Harry would never quite remember how he had managed to get through the exams when he was half expected Voldemort to come bursting through the door at any moment. Yet the days crept by, and there could be no doubt that Fluffy was still alive and well behind that locked door. It was sweltering hot, especially in the large classrooms where they did their written papers. There had been given special new quills for their exams, which had been bewitched with an anti cheating spell. They had practical exams as well. Professor Flitwick called one by one into the class to see if they could make a pineapple tap dance on a desk, across a desk. Professor McGonagall watched them turn a mouse into Snufflebox. Points were given for how pretty their Snufflebox was, but taken away if it had whiskers. Snape made them all nervous, breathing down their necks while they tried to remember how to make forgetfulness potion. Harry did the best he could, trying to ignore the stabbing pains in his forehead, which had been bothering him ever since his trip to the forest. Neville thought Harry had a bad case of exam nerves because Harry couldn't sleep. But the truth was that Harry kept being woken up by his old nightmare, except this one now was worse than ever because there was a hooded figure dripping blood in it. Maybe it was because he hadn't seen what Harry had been in the forest, or maybe because he didn't have scars burning in their foreheads, but Ron and Hermione didn't seem to be worried about the stone as Harry. The idea of Voldemort certainly scared them, but he didn't keep visiting them in their dreams. And they were so busy with their studying, they didn't even spend much time to fret about Snape, or anyone else for that matter who was up there. The very last exam was a history of magic, a 1 hour answering questions about batty old wizards who invented self-stirring cauldrons, and they'd be free for the whole wonderful week until the exam results came out. When the ghost of Professor Binns told them to put down their quills and roll up their parchment, Harry couldn't help but cheering with the rest. "This was far easier than I thought it would be," said Hermione, as she joined the crowds of flocking out into the sunny grounds. "I needn't have learned 1637 Werewolf Code of Conduct, or the uprising of Elfie the Eager." Hermione always liked to go through the exam papers afterward, but Ron said this made him feel ill. So they wandered down to the lake and flopped under a tree. The Weasley twins, Lee and Jordan, were tickling the tentacles of a giant squid, which was basking in the warm shallows. "No more studying," Ron sighed happily, stretching out on the grass. "You could look more cheerful, Harry. We've been a week before we could find out how badly we've done. There's no need to worry about it yet." Harry was rubbing his forehead. "I wish I knew what this means," he burst out angrily. "My scar keeps hurting. It happened before, but never as often as this." "Go to Madame Pomfrey," Hermione suggested. "I'm not ill," said Harry. "I think it's a warning. It means danger's coming." Ron couldn't get worked up. It was too hot. "Harry, relax. Hermione's right. The stone is safe as long as Dumbledore's around. Anyway, we've never had any proof Snape found out how to get past Fluffy. He nearly had his leg ripped off once. He's not going to try it again in a hurry, and Neville will play Quidditch for England before Hagrid lets Dumbledore down." Harry nodded, but he couldn't take off this lurking feeling that there was something he'd forgotten to do, something important. When he tried to explain this to Hermione, "That's just exams. I woke up last night and I was halfway through my transfiguration notes before I remembered what we'd done that one." Harry was quite sure this unsettling feeling didn't have anything to do with work, though he watched the owl flutter towards the school across the bright blue sky, a note clamped in its mouth. Hagrid was the only one who had ever sent him letters, Hagrid would never betray Dumbledore. Hagrid would never tell anyone how to get past Fluffy, never. But Harry had suddenly jumped to his feet. "Where are you going?" Ron said sleepily. "I just thought of something," said Harry, and he turned white. "We've got to go. We got to go see Hagrid now." "Why?" said Hermione, hurrying to get up. "Don't you think it's a bit odd," said Harry, scrambling up the grassy slope, "that what Hagrid wants more than anything else is a dragon, and Stranger turns up and just happens to have an egg in his pocket? How many people wander around with dragon eggs? It's against wizard law. Luckily, they found Hagrid, don't you think? Why didn't they see it before?" "What are you talking about?" said Ron. But Harry, sprinting across the grounds towards the forest, didn't answer. Hagrid was sitting in the armchair outside his house. His trousers and sleeves were rolled up, and he was shelling peas into a large bowl. "Hello," he said, smiling. "Finished your exams, eh? Got time for your drink?" "Yes, please," said Ron, and Harry cut him off. "No, we're in a hurry, Hagrid. I've got to ask you something. You know that night you won Norbert? What did the stranger you were playing cards look like?" "Dunno," said Hagrid casually. "I wouldn't take his cloak off." He saw the three of them and looked stunned and raised his eyebrows. "It's not that unusual. You got a lot of funny folk in Hogsmeade. That's one of the pubs, down in the village. Might have been a dragon dealer, maybe. I never saw his face. He kept his hood up." Harry sank down next to the bowl of peas. "What did you talk to him about, Hagrid? Did you mention Hogwarts at all?" "Might have came up," said Hagrid, frowning as he tried to remember. "Yeah, he asked what I did, and I told him I'm the gamekeeper here. He asked a bit about sort of creatures I look after. I told him, and I said I'd always really wanted was a dragon. And then I can remember too, well, because he kept buying me drinks. Let's see, yeah. He said he had a dragon egg, and we could play for cards for it if I wanted. But he had to be sure I could handle it. He didn't want to go to any old home. So I told him after Fluffy, a dragon would be easy." "And did he seem interested in Fluffy?" Harry asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "Well, yeah. How many three-headed dogs do you meet? Even around Hogwarts. So I told him, Fluffy's a piece of cake. If he knows, if you know how to calm him down, just play him a bit of music, and he'll go straight to sleep." Hagrid suddenly looked horrified. "I shouldn't have told you that," he blurted out. "Forget I said it. Hey, where are you going?" Harry, Ron, and Hermione didn't speak to each other all the way until they got to a halt in the entrance hall, which seemed very cold and gloomy after the grounds. "We've got to go to Dumbledore," said Harry. "Hagrid told the stranger how to get past Fluffy. And it was either Snape or Voldemort under that cloak. I must have been easy once he got his old the old girl drunk. I just hope Dumbledore believes us. Frenzy might back us up if Bane doesn't stop him. Where's Dumbledore's office?" They looked around, hoping to see a sign pointing them right in the right direction, but they had been told where Dumbledore lived, nor anyone knew where to see him. "Well, we'll just have to," said Harry began. His voice suddenly rang across the hall. "What are you three doing inside?" It was Professor McGonagall, carrying a pile of books. "We want to see Professor Dumbledore," said Hermione. Rather bravely, Harry and Ron thought. "See Professor Dumbledore?" Professor McGonagall repeated, as though it was a very fishy thing to want to do. "Why?" Harry swallowed. "Now what?" "It's sort of secret," he said. He wished at once he hadn't, because Professor McGonagall's nostril flares. "Professor Dumbledore left 10 minutes ago," she said coldly. "He received an urgent owl from the Ministry of Magic and flew off to London at once." "He's gone?" said Harry frantically. "Now?" "Professor Dumbledore is a very great wizard, Potter. He has many demands on his time." "But this is important." "Something you have to say is more important than the Ministry of Magic, Potter." "Look," said Harry, throwing caution to the wind. Professor, it's about the Sorcerer's Stone. Whatever Professor McGonagall had expected, it wasn't that. The books she was carrying tumbled out of her arms, but she didn't pick them up. How do you know? She sputtered. Professor, I think I know. There's someone's going to try to steal that stone. I've got to talk to Professor Dumbledore. She eyed him with a mixture of shock and suspicion. Professor Dumbledore will be back tomorrow, she said finally. I don't know how you found out about the Sorcerer's Stone, but rest assured, no one can possibly steal it. It's too well protected. But Professor Potter, I know what I'm talking about, she said shortly, and bent down and gathered her fallen books. I suggest you all go back outside and enjoy the sunshine. But they didn't. It's tonight, said Harry once. He was sure Professor McGonagall was out of earshot. Snape's going to go through that trapdoor tonight. He's found out everything he needs, and now he's got Dumbledore out of the way. He sent for that note. I bet the Ministry of Magic will get a real shock when Dumbledore turns up. But what can we? Hermione gasped. Harry and Ron reeled around. Snape was standing there. Good afternoon, he said smoothly. They stared at him. You shouldn't be inside on a day like this, he said, with an odd, twisted smile. We were, Harry began, without any idea what he was going to say. You want to be more careful, said Snape. Hanging around like this, people will think we're up to something, and Gryffindor really can't afford to lose any more points, can it? Harry flushed. They turned to go outside, but Snape called them back. Be warned, Potter! Any more nighttime wanderings, and I will personally make sure you are expelled. Good day to you. He strode off in the direction of the staff room. Out of the stone steps, Harry turned to the others. Right. Here's what we got to do, he whispered urgently. One of us has got to keep an eye on Snape. Wait outside the staff room and follow him if he leaves. Hermione, you'd better do that. Why me? That's obvious, said Ron. You can pretend to be waiting for Professor Flitwick, you know. Put on a high voice. Oh, Professor Flitwick, I'm so worried. I think I got a question 14 wrong. Oh, shut up, said Hermione. But she was agreed to go to watch out for Snape. And we'd better stay outside the third door corridor, Harry told Ron. Come on. But that part didn't work. No sooner had they reached the door, separating Fluffy from the rest of the school, than Professor McGonagall turned up again, and this time she lost her temper. I suppose you think you're harder to get past than a pack of enchantments, she stormed. Enough with this nonsense! If I hear you've come anywhere near here again, I'll take another 50 points from Gryffindor. Yes, Weasley, from my own house. Harry and Ron backed up in the common room. Harry had just said, oh, at least Hermione's got Snape's tail, when the portrait and the fat lady swung open and Hermione came in. I'm sorry, Harry, she wailed. Snape was out and asked me what I was doing, and I was waiting for Flitwick, and Snape went to go get him. And I've only just got away. I don't know where Snape went. Well, that's it then, isn't it? Harry said. The other two stared at him. He was pale, and his green eyes were glittering. I'm going to get out of here tonight, and I'm going to try to get the stone first. You're mad, said Ron. You can't, said Hermione. After what McGonagall and Snape said, you'll be expelled. So what? Harry shouted. Don't you understand? If Snape gets a hold of that stone, Voldemort's coming back. Haven't you heard what it was like when he was trying to take over? There won't be any Hogwarts to get expelled from. He'll flatten it or turn it into a school for the dark arts. Losing points doesn't matter anymore. Can't you see? Do you think he'll leave you and your families alone if Gryffindor wins the House Cup? If I get caught before I can get the stone, well, at least I'll have to go back to the Dursleys and wait for Voldemort to find me there. It's only dying a bit later than I would have because I'm never going to go over to the dark side. I'm going through that trapdoor tonight, and nothing you two can say will stop me. Voldemort killed my parents, remember? He glared at them. You're right, Harry, said Hermione in a small voice. I'll use the invisibility cloak, Harry said. It's just lucky I got it back. But will it cover all three of us? Said Ron. All three of us? Oh, come off it! You don't think we're going to let you go alone? Of course not, said Hermione briskly. How do you think you'd get to the stone without us? I better go look up through my books. There might be something useful. But if we get caught, you two will be expelled too. Not if I can help it, said Hermione grimly. Flitwick told me in secret that I got 112% on his exam. They're not throwing me out after that. After dinner, the three of them were nervously apart in the common room. Nobody bothered them. None of the Gryffindor had anything to say to Harry any more, after all. This was the first night he hadn't been upset about it. Hermione was skimming through all her notes, hoping to come across something of the enchantments that they could try to break. Harry didn't talk much. Both of them were thinking about what they were about to do. Slowly the room emptied, and people drifted off to bed. Better get the cloak, Ron muttered. Aunt Lee Jordan finally left, stretching and yawning. Harry ran upstairs in the dark dormitory. He pulled out the cloak, and then his eyes fell on the flute Hagrid had given them for Christmas. He pocketed that to use for Fluffy. He didn't feel much like singing. He ran back down to the common room. Oh, we better put the cloak on here. Make sure it covers all of us. If Filch finds one of our feet wandering along on our own. What are you doing? Said a voice from the corner of the room. Neville appeared behind the armchair, clutching Trevor, the toad, who looked as though he'd been making another bid for freedom. Nothing, Neville, really. And Harry hurriedly put on the cloak behind his back. Neville stared at their guilty faces. You're going out again, he said. No, 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 said Hermione. No, we're not. We're not. Go to bed, Neville. Harry looked at the grandfather clock by the door. He couldn't afford to waste any more time. Snape might be now playing Fluffy to sleep. You can't go out, said Neville. You'll be caught again. Gryffindor will then be even more trouble. You don't understand, said Harry. This is important. But Neville was clearly steeling himself for something desperate. I won't let you, he said, hurrying to stand in front of the portrait hole. I'll fight you. Neville, Ron exploded. Get away from that hole and don't be an idiot. Don't you call me an idiot, said Neville. I don't think you should be breaking any more rules. And you were the one who told me to stand up to people. Yes, but not to us, said Ron in exasperation. Neville, you don't know what you're doing. He took a step forward, and Neville dropped Trevor, the toad, who leapt out of sight. Go on, then. Try to hit me, said Neville, raising his fist. I'm ready. Harry turned to Hermione. Do something, he said desperately. Hermione stepped forward. Neville, she said, I'm really, really sorry about this. And she raised her wand. Protectus Tololis, she cried, pointing it at Neville. Neville's arms snapped to his sides. His legs sprang together. His whole body rigid. He swayed where he stood and then fell flat on his face, stiff as a board. Hermione ran to turn him over. Neville's jaws were jammed together, and he couldn't speak. Only his eyes were moving, looking at them in horror. What have you done to him? Harry whispered. Oh, it's the full body bind, Hermione said miserably. Oh, Neville, I'm so sorry. We had to, Neville. No time to explain, said Harry. You'll understand later, Neville, said Ron as they stepped over him and pulled the invisibility cloak on. But leaving Neville lying there motionless on the floor didn't feel very good, like a very good omen. In their nervous state, their statues and shadows looked like Filch. Every distant breath of wind sounded like Peeves swooping down on them. At the front of the first stairs, he spotted Mrs. Norris sulking near the top. Oh, let's kick her. Just this once, Ron whispered in Harry's ear. But Harry shook his head. As they climbed carefully towards Miss Norris, turned her lamp-like eyes on them, but didn't do anything. This didn't meet anyone else until they reached the staircase up to the third floor. Peeves was bobbing halfway up, loosening carpet that would make people trip. Who's there? He said suddenly and climbed towards him. He narrowed his wicked black eyes. Know you're there, even if I can't see you. Are you a ghoulie or a ghosty? Or a student beastie? He rose up in the air, floated. They're squinting at them. Should I call Filch? I should if something is creeping about unseen. Harry gave a sudden idea. Peeves, he said in a hoarse whisper. Bloody Baron has his own reasons for being invisible. Peeves almost fell out of the air in shock. He caught himself in time, however, about a foot from the stairs. So sorry, your bloodliness, Mr. Baron, sir, he said greasily. My mistake, my mistake. I didn't see you. Of course I didn't. You're invisible. Forget old Peeves. This is a little joke, sir. I have business here, Peeves, croaked Harry. Stay away from this place tonight. I will, sir. I will most certainly will, said Peeves, raising up in the air again. Hope your business goes well, Ben. I'll not bother you. And he scooted off. Brilliant, Harry, whispered Ron. A few seconds later, they were outside the third corridor, and the door was already ajar. Well, there you are, Harry said quietly. Snape's already got past Fluffy. Seeing the open door somehow seemed to impress upon all of the three that within the facing them. Underneath the cloak, Harry turned to the other two. If you want to go back, I won't blame you, he said. You can take the cloak. I won't need it now. Don't be stupid, said Ron. We're coming, said Hermione. Harry pushed the door open. The door creaked. Low, grumbling growls met their ears. All three of the dogs' noises sniffled madly in direction, even though he couldn't see them. What's that at his feet? Hermione whispered. It looks like a harp, said Ron. Snape must have left it there. It must wake. He must wake up the moment you stop playing it, said Harry. Well, here goes. He put Hagrid's flute to his lips and blew it. It wasn't really a tune, but from the first note the beast's eyes began to droop. Harry hardly drew in a breath slowly, but the dog's growls ceased. It tottered, its paws fell onto his knees, and he slumped through the ground, fast asleep. Keep playing, Ron warned Harry, as they slipped through the cloak and crept through the trapdoor. They could see the dog's hot, smelly breath as they approached their giants' heads. I think we'll be able to pull open the door, said Ron, peering over the dog's back. What? Want me to go in first, Hermione? No, I don't. All right, Ron. Through gritted teeth, stepped carefully through the dog's legs. He bent to pull the ring of the trapdoor, which swung open. What can you see? Hermione said anxiously. Nothing, just black. There's no way of climbing down. You'll just have to drop. Harry, who was still playing his flute, waved Ron to get his attention and pointed to himself. You want to go first, are you sure? Said Ron. I don't know how deep this thing it goes. Give the flute to Hermione so she can keep him asleep. Harry handed her the flute over to her. In a few seconds of silence, the dog growled and twitched. But the moment Hermione began playing it, he fell back asleep, deep sleep. Harry climbed over it and looked down through the trapdoor. There was no sign of bottom. He lowered himself through the hole until he was hanging on by his fingertips. Then he looked at Ron and said, If anything happens to me, don't foul. Go straight to the Owley and send Hedwig to Dumbledore, right? Right, said Ron. See you in a minute, I hope. And Harry let go. Cold, damp air rushed past him. He fell down, flump, with a funny, muffled sort of thump. He landed on something soft. He sat up and felt around, his eyes used to the gloom. It felt as though he was sitting on some sort of plant. It's okay, he called up to the light, the size of a postage stamp, which the opening door. As soon as the soft landing, you can jump. Ron followed right away. He landed and sprawled next to Harry. What's this stuff? Was his first words. Dunno. Some sort of plant thing, I suppose. It's here to break the fall. Come on, Hermione. The distant music stopped, and there was a loud bark from the dog, but Hermione had already jumped through, and she landed on Harry's other side. We must be miles under the school, she said. Luckily, it's this plant thing here, really, said Ron. Lucky? Shrieked Hermione. Look at you both. She leapt up and struggled towards the damp wall. She had to struggle because the moment she landed, the plant started to twist like a snake, tendrils all around her ankles. As for Harry and Ron, their legs had already been bound tightly, in long creepers without noticing. Hermione had managed to free herself before the plant got the grip on her now. She watched in horror as the two boys fought to pull the plant off them. The more they strained against it, the tighter and faster it plant wound around them. "Stop moving!" Hermione ordered them. "I know what this is. This is a devil's snare." "Oh, I'm so glad we know what it's called. That's a great help," snarled Ron, leaning back, trying to stop the plant from curling around its neck. "Shut up! I'm trying to remember how to kill it," said Hermione. "Oh, well, hurry up. I can't breathe," Harry gasped, wrestling with it as it curled around his chest. "Devil's snare, devil's snare. What did Professor Sprout say? Oh, it likes the dark and damp, so light a fire," Harry choked. "Yes, of course. But there's no wood," Hermione cried, wringing her hands. "Have you gone mad?" Ron bellowed. "Are you a witch or not?" "Oh, right," said Hermione as she whipped out her wand and waved it and muttered something and sent a jet of same bluebell flames that she had used as Snape and at the plant. In a matter of seconds, the two boys were loosening their grip, and they cringed away from the light and the warmth. Wriggling and flailing, it unraveled itself from the bodies, and they were able to pull free. "Luckily you pay attention in herbology, Hermione," said Harry, as he joined her by the wall, wiping the sweat off his face. "Yeah," said Ron. "Luckily Harry doesn't lose his head in a crisis." "There's no wood, honestly." "This way," said Harry, pointing down the stone passageway, which was about their way forward. All they could hear, apart from the footsteps, was a gentle drip of trickling water on the walls. The passageway sloped down, and Harry was reminded of the Gringotts. With such unpleasant jolt of the heart, he remembered the dragons. He said to be guarding the vaults of the wizard's bank. If they met dragons, a fully grown dragon, Norbert, had been enough. "Can you hear something?" Ron whispered. Harry listened. Soft, rustling, clinking seemed to be coming from up ahead. "What do you think? It's a ghost?" "I don't know. Sounds like wings to me." "There's light ahead. I can see something moving." They reached the end of the passageway and saw before them a brilliantly lit chamber, ceilings stretching high above them as it was full small jewelry, bright birds fluttering all and tumbling all around the room. On the opposite side of the chamber was a heavy wooden door. "Do you think that they'll attack us if we go across the room?" said Ron. "Probably," said Harry. "They don't look very vicious, but I suppose if they swoop down at us, well, there's no choice. I'll run." He took a deep breath, covered his face with his arms, and sprinted across the room. He expected to feel sharp beaks and claws tearing at him in seconds, but nothing happened. He reached the door untouched. He pulled the handle, but it was locked. The other two followed him. They tugged and heaved at the door, but it would not budge, not even Hermione, when she tried her Elfamora charm. "Now what?" said Ron. "These birds. They can't be here for decoration," said Hermione. "They're watching birds soaring overhead, glittering, glittering." "They're not birds," Harry said suddenly. "They're keys. Winged keys. Look carefully. So that must mean," he looked around, "the chamber," while the others two squinted up at the flock of keys. "Yes, look, broomsticks. They've all got to catch the keys to the door." "But there are hundreds of them!" Aaron exclaimed. "The lock that lock on the door." "Well, we're looking for a big old-fashioned one, probably silver by the handle." They each seized a broomstick, kicked off the ground, to soar into the midst of the clouds of the keys, and grabbed and snatched. The bewitched keys darted and dived so quickly it was almost impossible to catch one. For not not for nothing, though, was Harry the youngest seeker in the century, and he had a knack for spotting what other people didn't. After a minute of weaving through and whirling the rainbow of feathers, he noticed a large silver key, one that had a bent wing, as if it had already been caught and stuffed into the keyhole. "That one," he called to the others. "That big one there. No, there. The bright one with the blue wings, the feathers all crumpled on one side." Ron went speeding in the direction Harry was pointing, crashed into the ceiling, nearly fell off his broom. Well, we've got closing on it, Carrie called, taking his eyes off the key, the damaged ring. Ron, come at it from above. Hermione, stay below and stop it from going down, and I'll try to catch it right now. Ron dived, rocketed upward. The key dodged them both, and Harry streaked after it. He sped towards the wall. Harry leaned forward with a nasty little crunching noise, pinned against the stone with his hand. Ron and Hermione cheers echoed around the chamber. They landed quickly, and Harry ran to the door, the key struggling in his hand. He rammed it into the lock and turned it, and it worked. The moment the lock had clicked open, the key took flight again and looked very battered now, as it had been caught twice. Ready? Asked Harry for the other two, and they put their hands on the handle. They nodded and they pulled the door open. The next chamber was so dark they couldn't see anything at all. But as they stepped into the light, suddenly flooded the room, so to reveal an astonishing sight. There were standing at the edge of a huge chessboard. Behind the black chessmen were taller than they were carved out of what looked like black stone. Facing them, way across the chamber, there were white pieces. Ron and Harry and Hermione shivered silently. The towering white chessmen had no faces. Now what do we do? Harry whispered. It's obvious, isn't it? Said Ron. We're to play our way across the room. Behind the white pieces they could see another door. How? Said Hermione nervously. I think, Ron said, we're going to have to be chessmen. He walked up to the Black Knight and put his hand out to touch it on the knight's horse, and at once the stone sprang to life. The horse pawed the ground, and the knight turned his helmet head to look down at Ron. Do we, have to join to get across? The Black Knight nodded. Ron turned to the other two. This needs thinking about, he said. I suppose we've got to take the place of 3 black pieces. Hermione and Harry stayed quiet, watching Ron think. Finally, he said, Now, don't be offended or anything, but neither of you are very good at chess. We're not offended, said Harry quickly. Just tell us what to do. Well, Harry, you take the place of the bishop, and Hermione, you go there instead of the castle. What about you? I'm going to be the knight, said Ron. The chessmen seemed to have been listening, because these words the knight bishop in the castle turned their backs on the white pieces and walked off the board, leaving 3 empty squares, and Harry and Ron and Hermione took. White always plays first in chess, said Ron, peering across the board. Yes, look. The white pawn moved towards a square. Ron started to direct the black pieces, and they moved silently. Whenever he sent them, Harry's knees were trembling. What if they lost? Harry moved diagonally 4 squares to the right. The first real shock came when the other knight was taken, and the white queen smashed him to the floor and dragged him off the board, where they lay quite still, face down. Had to let that happen, said Ron, looking shaken. Leaves you free to take the bishop. Hermione, go on. Every time one of their men would lost, the white pieces showed no mercy. Soon there was a bundle of limp black players slumped against the wall. Twice Ron had only noticed in time that Harry and Hermione were in danger. He himself darted around the board, taking almost as many white pieces as he had the lost black ones. We're nearly there, he murmured suddenly. Let me think, let me think. The white ones turned her black face towards him. Yes, said Ron softly. It's the only way. I've got to be taken. No! Harry and Hermione shouted. That's chess, snapped Ron. You've got to go make the sacrifices. I'll make my move, and she'll take me. That leaves you free to checkmate. Be the king, Harry. But do you want to stop Snape or not? Ron! Look, if you don't hurry up, he'll already have the stone. Oh, there was no alternative. Ready? Ron called, his face determined. Here I go. Now don't hang around once you've won. He stepped forward, and the White Queen pounced. She struck Ron hard across the head and the stone arm, and he crashed to the floor. Hermione screamed, but stayed on her square as the Queen dragged Ron off to the side. He looked as if he had been knocked clear out. Shaking, Harry moved the 3 spaces to the left. The White King took off his crown and threw it at Harry's feet. They had won. The chessmen parted and bowed, leaving the door ahead clear. With one last desperate look back at Ron, Harry and Hermione charged through the door, up to the next passage. What if He's all right, said Harry, trying to convince himself. What do you reckon's next? Well, we've had Sprouts, we've had the Devil's Snare, Flitwick must have been the charms and the keys, McGonagall transfigured the chessmen to have them alive, that there's Quirrell's spell, and Snape's. They had reached the other door. All right, Harry whispered, go on. Harry pushed it open, and the disgusting smell in their nostrils made both of them pull their robes up over their noses. Eyes watering, they saw, flat on the floor in front of them, a troll, even larger than the one they had tackled out in the cold, with a bloody lump on its head. I'm glad we didn't have to fight that one, Harry whispered. They stepped carefully over the massive legs. Come on, I can't breathe. He pulled the door next open, both of them hardly daring to look at what come next. And there was nothing very frightening in there, just a table, 7 different shapes and bottles standing in line. Snape's, said Harry. What do we have to do? They stepped over the threshold, and immediately a fire sprang up behind them in the doorway. It was an ordinary fire either. It was purple, with the instant black flames that came up from the doorway, leading out. They were trapped. Look! Hermione seized the roll of paper in the bottles. Harry looked over her shoulder and read it. Danger lies before you while you safely lies behind. 2 of us will help you, whichever you would find. One among us 7 will let you move ahead. Another will transport the drinker back instead. 2 among are numbered, hold on neatly wine. 3 of us are killers, waiting hidden in line. Choose unless you wish to stay here forevermore. To help you in your choice, we give you these clues 4. First, however slyly the poison tries to hide, you will always find some in the nettle, wine's left side. Second, different are those who stand on either end, but if you would move onward, neither is your friend. Third, as you can see clearly, all different sizes, neither dwarf nor giants holds death inside their insides. Fourth, the second left and the second on the right, as twins once noticed, taste them, though different at first sight. Hermione let out a great sigh, and Harry was amazed, saw that she was smiling. The very last thing she said, Brilliant, said Hermione. Oh, this isn't magic, it's logic, it's a puzzle. A lot of greatest wizards haven't got an ounce of logic. They'd be stuck here forevermore. So will we, won't we? Of course not, said Hermione. Everything we need is right here on this paper. 7 bottles are 3. There are 3 are poisons. 2 are wine. 1 will set us safely through the black fire. The other one will get us back through the purple. But how do we know which one to drink? Give me a minute. Hermione read the paper 3 times, several times. Then she walked up down the bottles, muttering to herself, pointing to them. At last she clasped the hands. Got it! She said the smallest bottle will get us through the black fire towards the stone. Harry took the tiny bottle. There's only enough for one of us, he said. That's hardly one swallow. They looked at each other. Which one will get you back through the purple flames? Hermione pointed at the round bottle, right at the end of the line. You drink that one, said Harry. No, listen. Get back to Ron. Grab the broom and the fine keys and get out of here to the trapdoor to Fluffy. Go straight to the owlery and send a Hedwig to Dumbledore and tell him I might be able to hold Snape off for a while, but I'm no match for him, really. But, Harry, what if you know who is with him? Well, I was lucky once, wasn't I? Said Harry, pointing at the scar. I might get lucky again. Hermione's lip trembled, and she suddenly dashed at Harry and threw her arms around him. Hermione? Harry, you're a great wizard, you know. I'm not as good as you, said Harry, very embarrassed as she let go of him. Me? Said Hermione. Books, cleverness. They are more important things. Friendship and bravery. And oh, Harry, be careful. You drink first, Harry said. So you are sure, which is, aren't you? Positive, said Hermione, and she took a long drink from the round bottle at the end and shuddered. It's not poison? Asked Harry anxiously. No, but it's like ice. Quick, go before it wears off. Good luck. Take care. Go! Hermione turned and walked straight through the purple fire. Harry turned and took a deep breath into the smallest bottle. He turned to face the black flames. Here I come, he said, and he drained the bottle in one gulp. It was indeed as though ice was flooding his body. He put the bottle down and walked forward, braced himself, and saw the black flames licking his body, but couldn't feel them. For a moment he couldn't see nothing but the dark fire. Then he was on the other side, in the last chamber, and there he was, already someone there. But it wasn't Snape. It wasn't even Voldemort. Hmm. Who was it?